Hi, I'm Kris Myers. Rebecca has taken an indefinite leave of absence, and yes, that means we lost her. We literally just don't know where she went, but I have her script notes, and between you and me, I'm better anyway. So let's have a look at these. Alright. Train ride to Hollywood, yada yada yada, Andy Sidaris, blah 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 blah. Many of their words anyway. On this episode, James and Allan talk about some movies they watched. They wrote a whole bunch more stuff for me to say, but I boiled this one down to its essence. Welcome to the Cinema Shame podcast, sponsored by DVD Netflix.
Enough chit-chat. This is the Cinema Shame podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies we haven't watched until now. This is another episode of the Cinema Shelfie format, where we roll the dice to see whether we were watching a DVD, Blu-ray, digital, and then what letter. The only gimmick is that we have to already own it and not have watched it. I don't have anything fun to say about any of this, so let's just start with mine. I think you went last time. It's my turn to start. I rolled. I'm glad you agree. This is a good way to start the episode. I rolled the letter T and DVD, and I pulled out two very different titles. One would qualify as a proper Cinema Shame, one did not. I'll let you guess which one I picked.
The one that didn't?
The one that didn't, correct. The one I didn't watch was The Tenant from Roman Polanski. I haven't seen it. On my shelf. Would have qualified. A great option for a Cinema Shame program. Instead, I watched the 1975 musical comedy Train Ride to Hollywood.
I haven't seen this, but, and this is something you hear me say a lot, I own the album.
Yeah.
They were the gods of Hollywood, and their faces brought smiles to millions all over the world. If only they were with us again.
Play it, Sam.
We're on a rock and roll choo-choo headed for Hollywood.
Finally, a motion picture that captures all the fun of an old-time Hollywood movie, with a little help from some new friends.
Baby, watch out. Cause we're rocking and a rolling on our way to Hollywood.
Red, I'm scared.
Frankly, I don't give a damn.
7 lovely ladies and they're all looking good. And they all belong to an Arabian hood. So watch out.
I hate Hollywood.
Baby, watch out.
An old-time movie. It's an old-fashioned melodrama.
Who could have perpetrated this terrible crime?
Don't look at me. I'm on a diet.
Godfather returns one last time.
Kiss Godfather's hand.
It's hard to track down an old movie star, but the search for President Ronnie finally begins.
You mean Ronnie the Gripper will be elected governor?
Maybe president even. He's so handsome. Oh, shut up, Eddie.
Guess I'm just a sentimental old fool. But I love the old songs.
So, in brief summary, Train Ride to Hollywood is Bloodstone's attempt to be both the Marx Brothers and the Beatles with none of their talent.
So it's a lot like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band with the Bee Gees and Peter Frampton.
That's a better comparison. We're at least in the right neighborhood. I knew Bloodstone only because I had this DVD. And I said, who's Bloodstone and why are they slathered all over this movie? So this is, let me see if I can, this is the $3.99 special from Half Price Books. It was marked down from a larger price that has since been obscured. It is well out of print and now selling for in the neighborhood of $30 to $40 on eBay. So it's a clearly much sought after title. This was directed by Charles Rondo, a name I've never heard until just now when I read it on the back of the box. And that shows. It may be worthwhile to look up whether he was a first and only time director, but let's just let our imaginations run wild and say that this was the only thing he ever did. I mean, okay, I'll look it up. Jeez.
Well, I'll say, like, the only reason why I even knew this movie existed, because I remember reading about it. I think it was in the Psychotronic video guide. And basically, Michael Wheaton basically describes it as, like, a bunch of really bad sketches put together. Like, it's not a really cohesive movie at all. It's, like...
That was one of my talking points, yes. Charles Rondo was a prolific TV director and directed 4 episodes of Get Smart, 4 episodes of Batman, 6 episodes of Mission Impossible, 4 episodes of BJ and the Bear. It feels like he ran out his welcome after 4 episodes.
Yeah.
But he was all over TV from, let's see, 1958 through the BJ and the Bear episodes he directed in 1980. So that is Charles Rondo. The concept for this movie is Bloodstone appears as themselves. They are Harvey Willis. Oh, see, I can't even read my writing. I scribbled it down. Willis Draffin Jr., Charles Love, Charles McCormick. I misspoke and said Harvey. It's Harry Williams. It's a very important detail. I don't want you to get that wrong when you go to pub trivia and someone asks for 3 of the 4 members of Bloodstone. Although there are more members later on, and one was dead before this, so there was a few options. So Bloodstone is about to perform. Their manager, you know, he's the manager and cash hungry because he's wearing a tie pin in the shape of a dollar sign, and he keeps yelling money. He smells money. The crowd out there is money. Everything's money. The script was not great. So they're a R&B soul funk kind of band, and he walks into the dressing room to roust them and get them out onto the floor because those dollar signs are waiting. And they're in there watching an old Hollywood, like sort of Busby Berkeley musical on the television, dressed in white tails, head to toe, top hats, the whole works, and they say, this was glamorous, wouldn't it be great to be in the movies? And they're talking about old Hollywood. One of them says, I don't want to work in the movies, I want to be in the movies. Like, I want to live in the movies. And naturally, they shuffle out to go on stage. He somehow trips, falls, and hits his head, and enters the dream sequence that is the rest of the movie. They wake up and they read an ad about sort of, I guess it's a one ad for a band in Hollywood. Unclear. They didn't go into exactly what any of it was because it's dream sequence and it's train ride to Hollywood. So you have to get them on the train somehow. So they're going to Hollywood to audition for a nondescript gig as a band. You get the most inspired sequence of the film at that moment where they start bumping off train conductors to get their uniforms, and then they have a song and dance number with luggage and their 40s style song and dance. And at this point, it's clearly filmed in a very rudimentary way. There are awkward cuts and framing that you would never see in any competent film done by a musical choreographer or director. Like, they're supposed to be facing the camera, and then there'll be a cut to like 45 degrees to the right, and they're all looking the other direction, and we're still we hold this shot. It's not like a quick thing. It was like it was filmed with 2 cameras and they cut back and forth at regular intervals. It's kind of bizarre. But in this moment, I'm thinking this has got some potential because these guys are game performers. They're clearly enjoying themselves. There's a tempo to this and a knowledge about the old Hollywood styles. Like, this isn't bad. If the rest of the movie is going to unfold like this, I can see myself really liking this movie. This is fun.
There is something simply marvelous about a train ride. There's nothing more scintillating than a trainer motivating. Oh, that train ride. Oh, you can fly high, just on a train ride.
So the thing that I found most surprising before I get further down this train ride is that they don't really perform too many original numbers. If at all, it's mostly covers. Well-known covers. And not necessarily inspired versions of well-known covers. You've heard the record. You know what's on it.
I actually haven't listened to the record. It's one of the ones that I've bought that I haven't gotten around to yet.
Why didn't you know I was going to talk about this movie and listen to the record ahead of time? I know that part of the gimmick is that we don't tell you, but let's in tune, man. They hop on the train, and it's clear we're trying to tap into an Agatha Christie Murder on the Orient Express vibe from the get-go. And as we're taking tickets, the guys are taking tickets, we are introduced in sequence to people doing impressions of old Hollywood stars and playing those roles. So we have a Bogart.
Robert Saatchi?
No, it's played by Guy Marks. So you will recognize him.
Okay, but they couldn't get Robert Saatchi, who is actually the Bogart impersonator, so they had to get a second-rate Bogart impersonator.
This guy pops up in like one-off bits on TV episodes. He's recognizable. He is a very good sounding Bogart, but watching him do Bogart is painful because he's not at all.
Not that one, Sam. You know the one I want to hear. Sing it again, Sam, for old time's sake.
But he looks okay in a white suit jacket, tux jacket. So it's okay. We also have Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara. So it's they're supposed to be playing the actors playing the role. It's a little confusing.
So it's not Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh. It's the characters from Gone with the Wind.
But they are Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh, but they are playing the characters from Gone with the Wind, and they're called Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh. And sometimes they're referred to Rhett and Scarlett. There's no consistency here. It's whatever the joke needs.
Tickets, please. Are you going all the way to L.A., folks?
Frankly, I don't give a damn.
Well, anywhere but Atlanta. Oh, goodness me, Rhett, pass me my sauce. I do believe I'm getting the vapors.
We also have Dracula. It's a poor Dracula. It's the Jay Robinson, once again, another familiar actor. He pops up in actual Bram Stoker's Dracula. Francis Ford Coppola, he has a role there. He's Mr. Hawkins. I don't know if you remember. I had to look him up, and he's also Norman in Shampoo. Like he's around. He's done bits.
Oh, pardon me, but you look very familiar. What is your name anyway?
Just plain Bill. What's yours?
Oh, I'm Harry from Bloodstone.
Bloodstone. I like it.
We also have W.C. Fields, who is played by Bill Oberlin, who was a professional W.C. Fields impersonator. And he is by far the best thing about this gimmick with these old Hollywood characters. He is so good.
I'm assuming he's probably better than Rod Steiger.
He is, yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. But he's really good. Like, I would have watched, if we had just had W.C. Fields and left out all these other guys.
Cease, desist, unhand me, you jabber now.
Ticket, sir.
Well, let me give you a word of advice, my dear fellow. Never wake a man on a train, never draw to an inside street, and never eat at a place called Mother's. They can all do you in.
We can't have everything. Yeah. There's the Godfather and his assistant, sort of. He's not really playing anybody specific. I guess he's supposed to be one of the sons, but nondescript son. He's just there to bounce lines for the Godfather.
Frari, via linguini.
What?
My godfather wishes to know the names of the 7 bimbos.
And Jean Harlow is here, but for the first half of the movie, or first few minutes, you can't tell whether she's supposed to be Jean Harlow or Marilyn Monroe. She's just a blonde in a white dress.
Yeah.
Really kind of forced.
Don't do that, Count. You make me so nervous when you do that.
There's a joke that I clearly didn't get. Maybe it would have been funny. I'm not guaranteeing anything. But they're supposed to be playing Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy. And I don't know why it was funny. They were just under snow the whole time.
Well, it's because they made all the Canadian Mountie movies.
Oh, that's... Yes, okay. All right. Fine. That doesn't make it funny, but that's the joke. Shortly into this train trip, we also meet the Sheik and his harem. And his harem, I guess there's 7 because they're all named after days of the week. Because that's the one, and one of the members of one of the Bloodstone guys falls in love with Saturday, I guess. And there's one of the other inspired sequences takes place with this harem he goes in because he wants to see all the women in their bunks and is like peeking in on all of them, and it's a little lechy but kind of funny because that's played really broadly, and the women aren't altogether unexcited about his appearance. They just kind of think he's an innocuous little guy wandering around. But he jumps into the bunk with Saturday, and the Sheik comes in, so he pretends he's her leg sticking out of the bunk with the curtain shut. And the Sheik is rubbing his leg and telling him how lovely his legs are. And later he recognizes him because of the shapeliness of his legs.
They've seen the everything you've always wanted to know about sex, but we're afraid to ask.
Yeah. And this sequence turns into a silent film sequence when the Sheik comes in, and it goes sepia toned, and there's I would say this is the other fun bit of the movie, in that they're having these log dialogue exchanges, and then it'll cut to the dialogue card and it just says hi.
Yeah.
This movie is not without some inspiration. I cannot deny all of the charms. But once it rolls down the line a little bit, and you start to see that there really wasn't too much thought put into how this movie progressed, like you said, it's a sequence of bits, and I've mentioned the best 2. The murder happens, and it's Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy are killed when the lights go out, and everybody panics, and Bogart, because he is the wisest of the bunch, apparently, determines that they were killed by armpit BO. I mean, that's as good as it gets, really.
Yeah.
In a further, we don't know where this movie is going moment, we have a Bloodstone-led New Orleans-style funeral procession for... I'm skipping ahead, but this is after the BO gets Clark Gable. And there's a New Orleans-style funeral procession with Bloodstone as the jazz band in the front, and it's put in a Western. It's just a mishmash of classic Hollywood genres, and like I said, it's not totally devoid of inspiration, but after 60 minutes, it just feels like another bit you just have to endure. And the musical numbers are okay to tolerable. Like, for a R&B soul funk band that peaked between 73 and 84, I wanted some R&B soul and funk that peaked during 1973 to 1984 and not
them doing their
Tootsie Don't Cry and I Need Money. They're just not... They're not trying real hard, and maybe it's because we are trying to figure out what to do with Bloodstone. They're not without some on-screen charisma. They could have been an entertaining act, but we didn't do enough to make it their movie. They're not natural comedians, so this Marx Brothers business where they're trying to have these shenanigans on the train isn't really working. And we're so stuck in doing these well-known doo-wop hits and we're not giving the band the opportunity to have a personality. Really, that's their own.
Well, when I hear Marx Brothers on the Train and a band, I automatically think A Hard Day's Night.
Right, and that's definitely an inspiration here. Like I said, you're definitely looking at the Beatles, and you're definitely looking at some of the older comedians for inspiration of how this goes down. And the impersonators are just so... tell so many easy gags. Like, this is... I'm going to summarize the Dracula character for you in one joke. He served a red drink in a tall glass. He tastes it and tries to send it back because it's a Bloody Mary. This isn't what I ordered.
Yeah.
That's the best joke he gets. And Clark Gable just comes up with different ways to say, I don't give a damn, and that pays off in Bogart's eulogy for Clark Gable, in which they actually play stills featuring the real Clark Gable and say, he really didn't give a damn. Yeah, so that's Train Ride to Hollywood. They eventually do wake up. I'll spoil it for everyone.
Damn it.
He eventually does wake up, and they go out and perform, and that's when I'm thinking, we're going to get a real Bloodstone song now that they're out of the train, they're out of this Hollywood dream, they're back on stage for reals, and we get another cover. I'll save you the agony in that the Brando character was the B.O. killer. But it was the Brando character who transforms into his character from The Wild One at night. He's the killer, and he's also the producer in Hollywood, and he reveals himself after they sing "Life Could Be a Dream, Sweetheart."
I'm going to say you're doing a really shitty job of making this sound like a movie I shouldn't watch.
You know, that could be intentional, because I won't say I regretted watching it.
Yeah.
It's one of those that I can tell you that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I can tell you all the reasons it doesn't work and all the reasons you shouldn't watch it. But when I'm talking about it, if I was hearing myself talk about it, I'm like, I'm going to watch that movie. There's enough in it that I didn't hate it. I may actually keep it on my shelf, as much as I say that was lazy. But it's not like other movies in that it is made in 1975, and we did attempt to put a black R&B funk band at the center of this reference to old Hollywood. And there are moments that you see the movie that you hoped it would be.
I've always, just the little bits I've known about it, I've always imagined more as having almost like a Dolomite vibe. Is that accurate? Is it that sort of level of production, or?
It's better than that. It's not Dolomite level in that it's clear that these people don't know what they're doing. When I learned that the director was a TV director, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It was shot, I got the impression that it was maybe rushed through because there were takes that didn't seem quite right. And when they were filming the musical sequences, and I was noticing that the angles were awkward, and sometimes there's one in that opening number that I said was like what I wanted out of the movie. He accidentally kicks one of the suitcases down during the number, and they didn't bother to reshoot that bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't kill the vibe of the scene. It's just something you notice, and that lacks the polish that you'd expect from an experienced filmmaker or a movie with a budget. Or a movie with time to shoot. These are things that would have been easily fixed. But if you're on a tight budget, if you're on a tight schedule just to get it pushed out, that's what happens.
Well, also it could have been a tight schedule because they were touring in the middle of it, and they.
I mean, this was at the beginning. They had a 1973 was their biggest record, Natural High. It sold 1 million copies. This was not a small band, really. I mean, they were well known. They charted regularly for the next few years on the R&B charts, and that record had a Natural High single that made number 10 on the U.S. pop charts. So 1975 would have been the peak of Bloodstone. People would have known Bloodstone.
Why do I keep my mind on you all the time?
I believe they had a record come out as late as 2003. 2004 they had a record, but they've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 band members. Of the original, only one is still alive. That's the Harry Williams character, the guy that actually falls and hits his head. He survived his klutziness to.
So he didn't get a concussion while filming. That's good.
I think he's okay. But the rest of them are kind of interchangeable in the movie. There's not a whole lot of differentiation between the three. They look different, but they're not given different characters. The only one who's given anything to do is Charles Love, who was the one who was wooing the harem girl.
That was what I was going to ask. Are there any recognizable starlets in the harem, or is it all sort of? Because with the 70s, it always seemed.
Yes, there were some. I wrote down. Saturday was Tracy Reed.
Okay, yeah, no, I've heard. Yeah,
she is in Running Scared, which is where I know her. She's also in Car Wash, Trouble Man. So she did a number of things that you recognize. She was a regular on a bunch of TV series throughout the 70s and 80s. What's funny is that you go on IMDb, they don't list nearly anyone in the cast. There's only one of the girls listed here.
Well, that's always, to me, the fun part of watching, like, sort of low-budget movies from this era is, like, suddenly, like, oh, there's Ushi Daigard, or, like, somebody from, like, a Russ Meyer movie that you had no idea was in, like, this movie for, like, 10 seconds, because they all... there was a limited pool of women willing to show their breasts in 70s movies, so you tended to see a lot of them over and over again.
They're all in... basically, typical harem bikinis and wraps. It's just an excuse to have 9 girls or 8 or whatever. Yeah. I don't know if there's 7. I feel like there are more when they're on screen surrounding everybody, but I guess there's 7 on screen with bikinis. It's clear that the purpose of the harem. Train Ride to Hollywood may stick around. I can't decide whether the allure of $40 for this movie is necessarily going to cause me to sell it. I don't foresee myself watching it again, but you never know.
The letter of the day. That's right, it's the letter of the day.
I went. I had digital and S. And I sat down and I realized as I was looking through my S thing that there's an Andy Sidaris movie that I hadn't watched. And it was one that the reason why I hadn't watched it was because it was basically one of his really early movies. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to watch a movie before he honed the Andy Sidaris movie formula. And I know we have, like, a lot of our listeners are big into classic Hollywood. So they might not be as familiar with Andy Sidaris as sort of the people like I tend to hang out with who tend to be more genre and exploitation movie fans. So I put together a list of the top 10 things to expect in an Andy Sidaris movie. But the reality is that this list could have been like 100 things to expect in an Andy Sidaris movie, because he's a very distinctive filmmaker who does a lot of the same things over and over again.
Some would call him an auteur.
He was absolutely an auteur, like without a doubt. And so number 1 is that Playboy centerfolds will be cast as special agents or crime fighters. Some are open about what they do. Some work undercover, often as strippers. They're usually the main characters and dominate the narrative, while the main characters are goofy special agent himbos, mostly played for comic relief. Number 2, the setting will probably be Hawaii, because Andy Sidaris lived in Hawaii and liked shooting there. The main villain will often be played by a recognizable actor slumming for a paycheck. Number 4, there will be a scene where we see someone, usually the main villain, getting a massage from a topless woman. Number 5, actors who were cast as villains in earlier movies will show up in later movies as heroes, working with the people they were trying to kill before. Sometimes this is explained. Often it is not. Number 6, someone will attach a bomb to a remote control vehicle of some type. Number 7, you will see people get in and get out of a helicopter, and a lot of helicopter footage because helicopters are money. Number 8, many people will be shot and killed without any consequences for the people who shot and killed them. Number 9, the credits will be displayed in an extremely cheap but imaginative way. And number 10, the film ends with most or all of the surviving main non-villain characters coming together to explain the plot of the movie we just watched. Now, as I started, as I started watching this first movie, I suddenly realized 5 minutes in, I actually have on my Plex server Andy Sidaris' first movie, and it also starts with the letter S. So instead of just doing one Andy Sidaris movie on my Plex server that started with S, I'll do both. So I stopped watching that second one and started watching Stacy.
Stacy, the James Blunt bombshell. She's a very private eye who mixes men, money, and murder. But no one messes with Stacy and lives.
Hey, man, don't gut me. Don't.
Oh, shit.
The syndicate wants to slay her, but she sends all the flowers.
You should trust no one that you don't sleep with on a regular basis.
Caught in a triple-cross blackmail multi-murder case, Stacy is... Take a ride on the wild side with Stacy. She's fast.
Exclamation point. We're very big on titles with exclamation points, and Stacy's one of them. And that was his
Does Stacy have an exclamation point?
It depends. If you go on IMDb, it doesn't. But if you look at the movie poster, it does. So it all depends on
oh yeah, look at that in the movie. The poster says Stacy exclamation point. Mm-hmm.
So and it was his very first movie. He had started before this as a director for The Wide World of Sports. And he was actually very influential, like in terms of filmmaking, like he did his own thing. But if you actually were to write a book about the history of football, he would have to be mentioned because he was very big in the creation of Monday Night Football and that whole, like he's really largely responsible for how we know football to have been filmed during that era. But I
just want to note too that it blew my mind when I realized that he had directed The Racing Scene, which is the documentary about James Garner's racing team in 1969. So when I popped on The Racing Scene as something I just, it's time I finally watched that movie as a James Garner superfan and saw his name in the credits, I had to press pause and go, hold the phone. The same Andy Sidaris? Yes, indeed, the same.
Well, and his before doing Stacy, his big taste of mainstream filmmaking was he helped shoot the football scenes in MASH. And he claims he shot all of them, and that's probably dubious. But at the same time, I can believe that Robert Altman probably wasn't interested in shooting the football scenes on their own.
He often outsourced his stuff to his assistants for scenes he just didn't want to do. Like he did that all the time. So it would not surprise me whatsoever if Sidaris filmed the entirety of those football scenes while Altman sat in his director's chair and smoked. Like I don't think that's probably accurate.
Sidaris claims that Altman's only contribution was he came up with a shot where a camera was inside the football. But he said like that's literally like 1 second of the total football footage in the final film. So Stacy, I watched it and I put it through my top 10 to see like how much of a Andy Sidaris movie it was, and it scored a 5 out of 10 because it definitely Stacy's played by Anne Randall, who is a Playboy centerfold, and she's cast as a detective. So she is literally referred to as a centerfold detective by other characters. There is a scene where the villain is getting a massage from a topless woman. There is a helicopter chase. Many people are shot and killed without any consequence for Stacy, who shoots and kills them. And the film ends with Stacy explaining what we've just seen. So it is a 5 out of 10. It's about she. What happens is she gets hired to come to this house of this wealthy wheelchair-bound widow, played by named Florence Chambers, who has been sent several disturbing photos. And there she meets like the Chambers household, who consists of Florence's nephew, her grandniece, her nephew's wife, and Pamela's and her niece's like Guru, plus the butler and the maid, who is named Marion, which is a joke that Andy Sidaris really loves because he repeated it in Malibu Express, which is technically some consider it a remake of Stacy. I think they're different enough that that sort of basically he just repeats a lot of stuff in Malibu Express. It's not so much as an actual remake, but what happens?
It's Evil Dead 2.
Exactly. Stacy soon learns that the butler is having sex with everyone and is taking photos of his trysts, and that photos leads to his murder, which Stacy investigates, and the guilty party sends goons to take care of Stacy, but she kills all 4 of them. And from the undeveloped film found in the butler's camera, she discovers that it was actually the niece all along who was the mastermind behind Frank's murder. And I was tempted to consider awarding the film also for the main villain being a recognizable actor, because the niece is played by Christina Rains from The Sentinel and Nightmares, and she's been in a bunch of stuff. But at this point, nobody knew who she was. Although it's funny because in terms of hot actresses in Andy Sidaris movies, she's probably the most respectable. Like in terms of she actually ended up going on to mainstream films, whereas the rest were pretty much always in exploitation movies. And Stacy ended up being a really good time. Anne Randall isn't necessarily good, but all she's really expected to do is run around in shirts without a bra, and she's phenomenal at that. Like she is top notch at running around without a bra. It's actually pretty amazing. So and also like I feel like it really announces itself as an Andy Sidaris movie, because it starts off with racing footage, and then we see the driver get out of the car and gasp, it's a woman. And she takes off her helmet, and then she undoes her top, revealing her breasts. And that's where we see the title credit of the movie, is a freeze frame of her taking her top off. And so that to me is like, that is a real mission statement of an auteur announcing who he is right at the beginning of his film career. And then after watching Stacy, I watched his second movie, which is Seven. And 7, it ended up scoring a 6 out of 10. And it really does resemble, like, it really has all of the hallmarks and guts and framework of the later Andy Sidaris movies. But the central problem with it is that there are only 2 women in the entire main cast. And so it really highlights how goofy his filmmaking can be when you take out that sort of TNA element. I mean, it's still there. There's a lot of gratuitous nudity in 7, but it's not the raison d'etre of the movie the way it is in the other films. And so because of that, it just becomes this thing where a bunch of doofuses who Andy Sidaris thinks are really funny, but aren't really actually funny, being incompetent. It really kills the vibe in a way. So basically what the movie is about is a group of 7 Hawaiian criminal masterminds have pooled their resources to kill a senator and other people in way of their illegal activities. And unable to stop them through regular means, the FBI pays Playboy mercenary Dana Savano, who is William Campbell, very, very familiar character actor. You might know him as Conan's dad. They pay him $7 million to kill all 7. And to do this, Dana recruits an elite team of 6, well, actually 7, people with different abilities to fulfill the mission. This includes Cowboy, who's a cowboy, TK, who's a daredevil, Kinsella, a white club-owning comic whose act consists of him doing a really racist impression of a black man, Ed Parker as himself, the lecherous professor who's a tech genius, and Alexa, played by Barbara Lee, who is a hot woman. That's her superpower. She's really hot. And she comes with Jenny, who is also a hot woman. And for some reason, Jenny is included as part of the 7, even though she does just as much as any other person in the 7. So technically this movie should be called 8, because for whatever reason, they're not counting Jenny, even though she should be counted. And Dana believes that any attempt to assassinate the villains separately will lead to the 6 survivors disappearing and responding violently. So all of their targets must be killed within the same half hour. And so the 7, well, actually 8, separate and follow their targets to determine how to kill them. Carbit gives his target a t-shirt with a target on it and shoots him while he's surfing. TK drops a bomb at his target from a hang glider. Kinsella shoots his with a shotgun during his stand-up routine. Ed throws his out of a high-story window. The professor kills his with a mini-missile from 8 miles away. And Alexa pushes hers into a stream where he hits his head. And then Dana shoots shoots one final villain who also is included in the 7. So there are also 8 villains as well. So yeah, no, this movie has a very misleading title. It should have been called 8. And like I said, technically it is the more Andy Sidaris movie between it and Stacy. I felt that it was the least satisfying of the 2 because it really just, hits on all of his, like, all the stuff you don't like in sort of his other movies that you have to ignore for the good stuff. This is all in 7. That's all 7 is. It's all the bad stuff and none of the good stuff. And it's really funny because of that goofiness. It doesn't play like an exploitation, like the gang is all coming together movie. It really plays more like sort of like a 70s kid movie, like Chops or Going Coconuts or Going Ape. Like it has that level of comedy. Like one of the big like comic set pieces is the professor is going through security at an airport, and somebody presses a button and a blow-up doll explodes in his in his thing. And the blow-up doll ends up appearing later on in the movie to help William Smith in his plan because he's supposed to have this woman in this car with him. And it's one of those things where Andy Sidaris thinks this is hilarious. And it's not. But, it's his movie.
It's just his reinterpretation of Chekhov's gun.
Exactly.
That's what it is. He showed the blow-up doll in the first act and it had to be used by the end of Act 3.
Yeah. And there are bits in 7 that you do see in his other movies. Like one of the killers uses a skateboard to kill his victims. Like you'll see him going down the highway and then he'll stop and like shoot someone, which I'm pretty sure is a hard target to Hawaii. I know it's definitely in one of his movies where one of the killers uses a skateboard as part of his MO. That's always funny to me. It's like if you look at like the cult cinema landscape, Hard Ticket to Hawaii is always the movie people talk about. When in reality, all of the Andy Sidaris movies are interchangeable. Like, it seems like people have decided at random that Hard Ticket is the one that has become the cult hit. But really, it could be any Andy Sidaris movie. They're all exactly the same. They all play differently. I actually personally, maybe my blasphemy, is I actually prefer the two movies his son directed, the Christian Sidaris, Andy Sidaris movies, which are pretty much Andy Sidaris movies, like in name only. Like they really are exactly the same. It just so happens that for whatever reason he let his son take credit for directing them. But yeah, so of the two, if you've never seen an Andy Sidaris movie, you should start with something like Hard Ticket to Hawaii, or like The Dallas Connection, or Guns, or Day of the Warrior. Like, all of those are much better in terms of like getting the full dose of what a truly like epic Andy Sidaris film experience is like. But if you want to start early, I would say start with Stacy and save 7 for, for when you're finally done them all and you want to complete the whole the filmography. And I will.
Yeah, I haven't seen either of these.
And I admitted this to James, and I'll admit to the audience that I ended up. It turns out that my digital copy of 7 is someone taped a TV version that is 10 minutes shorter than the actual full length version. And the version, like the tape I had, cut out just at the very end. And at that moment, it suddenly occurred to me, I actually own this movie on Blu-ray. So I got out the Blu-ray and I watched the last 10 minutes on Blu-ray. And the Blu-ray actually is the full version. So I haven't seen the full version of 7. But I can't imagine it actually being better, because part of the problem with 7 is that literally half the film is them setting up the 7 villains and the 7 heroes. And then the next half of the film is supposedly, the mission. But there is a lot of filler in that last 40 minutes of them like doing the mission. So it really, I can't imagine that I missed anything that I needed to see, because in the shortened version I could have cut probably 20 minutes from like the 94 version that I watched.
That is a lot of getting the band back together.
Yeah.
If you have to get together two bands of 7.
Yeah.
It's like doing the opening of Major League twice.
Yeah. Well, and it's really confusing, because like this is his first movie where he does the cheap but imaginative credits, because he uses an electric typewriter or electric printer for the credits and for all of like any sort of titles that would have been in the film. So he introduces each character with the electric typewriter, but because of the blandness of that and the way it's done, it's hard to tell if we're being introduced to the villain or the hero. So there are certain points where you see how bad this person is, and the way like they're being talked about, you almost like, and this is one of the good guys? And it's only when they're finally done with, and you finally realize, oh, it's 7 on 7. Oh no, it's actually 8 on 8. And that, so it is narratively confusing, and I think it's why he started like doing the whole wrap up at the end thing, is because ultimately like none of his movies make any sense, so he has to have the characters go, oh, that's why this person did this thing that made no sense, is because of this thing that we knew about but we didn't tell you about.
Well, it's almost a very convenient tactic for a filmmaker who, has a very particular MO and how he goes about doing his business. So you make this movie, you get to the end, and you go, I don't think that really made sense. That wasn't in there. Let's just have a little dialogue here at the end to fill in all the gaps. It's like you just make a bad movie and you fix it, and that's how you fix it in post, right?
Yeah.
You don't have the footage. You just explain what wasn't there. everything is fine.
And in fairness, I mean, Hitchcock does it with Psycho. So if Hitchcock can do it, then, I mean, it's fair game.
That's right. That makes it classic cinema. Well, I don't know how well we're doing with actually selling our first-time watches to the listeners. Maybe I'll pick, the hypothetical Tenet next time and see if I can't find a winner that I unequivocally say, yes, you should definitely find this movie and watch it because you're missing out. I'm
going with
something to.
I'm generally going with movies that I feel like I should have watched by now. I definitely feel like I should have seen Stacy at 7 by now, and the fact that I owned it on Blu-ray and hadn't watched it yet, these are movies that I definitely should have picked up by now. So if I'm giving somebody the gift of Andy Sidaris, even if they don't watch Stacy or 7,
that's true.
But if they watch Hard Ticket to Hawaii or Day of the Warrior, I mean, that's if you're going to watch one, I would say start with Day of the Warrior over Hard Ticket to Hawaii personally. But in terms of the cults, thing, everybody loves Hard Ticket to Hawaii, so that may be a good one to start with.
How about you getting lost?
What do you mean?
I mean it. Move out. Now. Hey, Colleen. Got a great ass.
So do you, Pilgrim.
Yep, let's do spin for our next Cinema Shelfie episode. You'll do the first one because that's what we do here. You are addicted to digital.
People are going to think it's fixed.
You're addicted to digital. How many digital files do you have under the letter Q?
Q. Let's see. I do have some. I know I have some. Let me check. Of course, now there we go. I have 6. I've seen one of them. But I have, Queen Kong, Queen of Space. Well, I've seen half of Queen Kong, so I guess I shouldn't count that one. But I have Queen of Outer Space, I have Quicksand, and I have the Quartermass Experiment. So I at least have 3 to choose from.
Ooh, you've got options. You've got options. I like those options. I rolled Blu-ray with the letter J. Off the top of my head, I don't know. But I'm going to leave that to be a surprise for the episode because
we need to come up with some.
Who can even?
We need to come up with some contingency rule if we end up getting a combination that we just don't have the ability to fulfill. It shouldn't be a respin. It should be like a punishment. We should we should be considered failures for not having not being able to do that. So
for not having an unwatched movie in that category. I don't know if there's got to be J and Blu-ray might be a problem, but there's got to be something, right? There's got to be something. If not, I have to go out and buy one I haven't seen with the letter
and
J.
Also,
that's the punishment. I have to go find one.
And also, if you have multi-movie sets, those totally count.
Yeah, absolutely. You can go dig in a set. It doesn't have to be on the literal shelf, the letter J. If it's a Blu-ray disc anywhere in your collection, I'm sure the box sets will provide any filler that I don't have elsewhere.
That's all for this episode of Kris Myers Introduces Guys Talking About Movies. Tune in next week when I'll try to desperately make that sound interesting all over again.